Good morning. So my name is Jackie Taylor. I'm going to state what we're reading first. So we have Hosea 1, 2 through 3, 2, 2 through 8, 3, 1 through 3, and 14, 1 through 4. All right, Hosea 1, 2 through 3. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, "Go, marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her. For like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord." So he married Gomer, a daughter of Dablam, and she conceived and bore him a son. Hosea 2, 2 through 8. Rebuke your mother, rebuke her, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. Let her remove the adulterous look from her face and the unfaithfulness from between her breasts. Otherwise I will strip her naked, and I will make her as bare as on the day she was born. I will make her a desert, turn her into a parched land, and slay her with thirst. I will not show love to her children, because they are the children of adultery. Their mother has been unfaithful, and she has conceived them in disgrace. She said, "I will go after my lovers who give me my food and my water, my wool and my linen, my olive oil and my drink. Therefore I will block her path with thorn bushes. I will wall her in so that she cannot find her way. She will chase after her lovers but cannot catch them. She will look for them but not find them. Then she will say, I will go back to my husband as at first, for then I was better off than now. She has acknowledged that I was the one who gave her the grain, the wine, and the oil, and who lavished her with the silver and gold which they used for Baal." Hosea 3, 1 through 3. The Lord said to me, "Go show your love to your wife again, even though she is loved by another man and is an adulteress. Love her as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they turn to other gods and love the sacred raisin cakes." Ooh. So I brought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and something of barley. Then I told her, "You are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will behave the same way towards you." Hosea 14, 1 through 4. "Return, Israel, to the Lord your God. Your sins have been your downfall. Take words with you and return them to the Lord. Say to them, forgive all of our sins and receive us graciously, that we may offer the fruit of our lips. Assyria cannot save us. We will mount war horses, or we will not mount war horses. We will never again say our gods to what our own hands have made, for in you the fatherless find compassion. I will heal their waywardness and love them freely, for my anger has turned away from them." This has been the word of the Lord. You guys can be seated.
Good morning, Redeemers. You guys doing this morning? You ready for the word? Oh, this one's weird. All right, so we are continuing our series, and it's Increasing Prophets, and this has been a tough one. I told you the minor prophets are difficult. They say a lot of hard stuff, and it's all about God's people, his chosen people in Israel, but it's still about us. It's still relevant of like, what is God's relationship to us? How do we take advantage of him? Like, he has loved us in such a way, and so he sends his prophets to come talk to us and say, hey, what is going on with you? Like, why have you been so unfaithful? Why has this been going on? You're idol worshiping, you're loving money, you're carousing with other countries. Like, they are difficult conversations. And I don't think any is harder than Hosea. Hosea paints one of the clearest pictures of our nature in our relationship to God. And it is a dark picture. So I hope you can bear with me. If you have children, on a serious note, send them to MSO. Because there are some hard things in this text. And this is the Bible. It is like that sometimes. God spoke to his prophet here in Hosea. And in this case, he doesn't just give Hosea some words. He doesn't just say, hey, go say these things. Oftentimes he was telling his prophets, if you can just bring me down a little bit, I'm still a little loud, I'm going to be yelling a lot. He doesn't just tell him, he's been telling his prophets, like, go and say these words, tell Israel that they've been naughty, go tell them stuff. In Hosea, he says, yeah, go tell Israel these words, but he also says you're going to live it out. You're going to live an allegory, a metaphor, a great example of what it means to be in relationship to God. So he says, I want you to go marry a prostitute. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to love her, and you're going to lavish her with gifts, and you're going to wed her and give your whole life to her. And what she's going to do is she's going to cheat on you, and she's going to run after other men, and she's going to try to deck herself out with abundance. at the neglect of you, and you're going to personally experience what it's like to be God who loves your creation so much but have them reject you so thoroughly. So what is the point? Hosea is not just going to say some words, he's going to live it, because when you live it, you feel it. When you feel it, you sense the pain and the agony more than you ever could just by hearing some words. And Hosea is passionate about this, and he's passionate not because just God is speaking to him, but he's passionate because he's living this love for a woman who cheats and betrays him. And so he experiences the pain of God. He experiences the heart of God in ways you just can't just by hearing words or reading some words. And because he does that, he writes with so much passion. One of the weird things about the book of Hosea is that it's 14 chapters long. That's why we had to read so much. It's 14 chapters long, and it seems like all over the place. When you read it, it just is going, it's swinging like from emotion to emotion. 1 minute it's saying, Israel, you have been such a betrayer. You've cheated on me. Like, you know this is going to come to your ruin. You're going to be taken over by other countries. You're going to be robbed of your possessions. You're going to be stripped naked, and it's harsh, and he's condemning them. And on the other hand, right after that, in other verses it says, but I love you so much. Will you come back? Will you come make a home with me? Like, I want to save you. I want to get our marriage back together. And it goes back and forth throughout that, mainly with the anger, but also with the love. And you sit there, and there's not like a one trajectory of this book. It's all over the place. Why? Because love is all over the place. If you've ever been passionate about somebody or something or a child or a marriage that has hurt you or betrayed you, you know that feeling of like, one hand, I'm like, man, I'm so angry. Like, you have hurt me, and I want you to experience what I'm experiencing. Like, I want you to stop living this way. I want you to experience the pain you've caused me. And on the other hand, you're like, but I want to fix this. I want to get you back. I want restoration. And so when you read the book of Hosea, that's what he's doing. God's coming back and forth going, I'm so angry, and you probably need to be punished if you're going to learn from this, but I want you back. I want to restore you. So back and forth it goes, because love goes back and forth. The pain, the feeling, it is deeply seated in this book. And that's what Hosea is living in. On the one hand, how dare you be so unfaithful? This is going to end up in your ruin. You're going to pay for this on the other hand, but I want to make things right. Come back. Anybody live in that? You felt, you guys are going to be silent today? Have you ever lived in that emotional pain of loving somebody that much and you feel all those intense emotions? Hosea is living that tension for God. That tension that God lives in when his prostituted bride, us, the church, keeps running away from him, though he loves us with all his whole being. You see, I don't think we fully can appreciate the love of God until we've experienced love that is costly. Until you've experienced love that wrecks you. Until you've experienced that type of giving of yourself to somebody with such passion and it has wrecked you or betrayed you, like you can't fully comprehend the grace of God and love of God in your life. And that's what Hosea brings us to. He paints this picture. He ties it to our own lives, our relationships. Now here's what I don't want you to miss today, because Hosea is painting a real-life picture of a real marriage, and yet he's saying the whole time this is also about God and his people. And I'm going to be doing that as we share this message today. I'm talking about your relationships. I'm talking about your marriages. I'm talking about your family. But at the same time, these things are tied together. Don't miss it. Whatever we're saying about the nature of our betrayals and our relationships and the hurts and divisions and pains, we're also saying about our faith in God, because one thing we can learn in Scripture is these things are very similar. The way I interact with God is often the way I'll interact with my loved ones. You hear me? So I want you to pay attention to that, because no matter what we say in the notes, and you will say, well, is that about God? The answer is yes. And if you say, well, is it about my marriage? The answer is yes. All right? It's about all of it. So when we read this text, we can see ways in which we all, in our faith and relationships, can slide towards unfaithfulness. We can all slide towards adultery, which is unfaithfulness. And we can all slide towards prostitution, which is giving ourselves to something that we think is going to give us more. We give our whole selves to something else that we want to love more than God or others because we believe it will profit us more. And God says, this is the prostitution of my people. So first off, here's the slide of how do we end up in those relationships? How do our relationships with God and our relationship with others, how do they begin to slowly disintegrate and get further and further apart? And here's what we can learn from the book of Hosea. Hosea points out that Israel has been unfaithful and is destroyed from a lack of knowledge. A lack of knowledge. That is not the first thing you think of when you think of how did we get here. Right? Well, it's because you just don't know much. No, we're missing the point of what a lack of knowledge is, okay? A lack of knowledge is not like I understand who you are, like I know my wife's name, or I remember her birthday to the best of my ability. That is not the knowledge we're talking about, okay? We're not talking about knowing like that. We're talking about intimacy. When you know somebody, like you know what they're going to say before they say it, right? You know like how they think and what they desire and what they dream about, right? Like when I was dating Michelle, I knew exactly what she wanted and what she desired and what she hoped for because there was an intimate knowledge. It usually was me, and so it was easy to guess. But you know what I'm saying? In those deeply close relationships, you know the person, you know their mannerisms, their idiosyncrasies, right? That's knowledge. Like it's an intimate knowledge, and God is saying, you have forgotten to know me. Like you forgot what I desire, what I love, what I believe in. You've forgotten what I've called us to. Like, do you know me? Not do you understand me? Not can you recite that Jesus died in the grave for 3 days and he was raised again for my salvation? Like not do you know, but do you know me? And he says, my people are destroyed for a lack of intimate knowledge. Like they don't know me anymore. They don't know what I want, what I desire. And so in our relationships, we lose that understanding of who the person is. We don't gaze upon them anymore to truly know them. The objects of our affections that get our attention, we come to know like that. And so Hosea is saying, you have lost that sense of knowing who God is and what matters. If you've ever listened to couples as they are beginning to splinter, as their relationships are beginning to slide away from each other, one of the first sentences you're going to hear as you listen is, I feel like I don't even know them anymore. Right? I feel like we don't even know who each other are anymore. I feel like they're a different person. I don't even know who he is anymore. I don't even know who she is anymore. Right? I don't know them. That is the first sign of the slide to adultery and prostitution. I don't know you because I don't spend time with you, because I don't gaze upon you, because I don't see you like that. The next thing that happens is there's the loss of the sacred. Now, what is that? There was a time when you got married, if you're married. There was a time when you came to Christ when you excited and you're like, God, I want to give my whole life to you. There was a time in which you got married in which you made vows and said, I want to give my whole self to you. There was this thing that was sacred, like it was holy. It's what does sacred mean? It means it is so set apart. It is bigger than who I am. Like I'm going to submit myself and my ambitions to this greater thing. I'm going to sacrifice for this greater thing. Nothing can get ahead of it because this is the most important. There's this and then there's all the riffraff. That's what sacredness is. Like there's this thing that you will not take my time from it. You will not, I will not treat it like it's nothing. It is the most important thing, and then there's everything else. Needs to be sacred things. And when you lose the knowledge, when you no longer care about the depth of your love or your marriage or your God, like you lose the sacred, it just becomes commonplace. So now God is the same as kids' sports, is the same as my job, is the same as my money. God isn't different. He's not set apart. Like I'll fit him into my schedule. I've lost the sacred. It is not greater or more important than me. It is just the same as everything else. And so what Hosea says here in chapter 4, he says, my people are being destroyed because they don't know me, since you priests, you people who profess to be the holy ones, the ones who set apart things for God, you refuse to know me. I refuse to recognize you as priests. He says, the more priests there are, the more they sin against me. They have exchanged the glory of God for the shame of idols. What he's saying is these priests are taking things at the same time as worshiping God and saying he's super important. They also are sacrificing to idols and wooden blocks and pieces of metal and just things that are commonplace they treat with the same reverence as they treat God. You lose the sacred. And we've all, to some degree, have lost the sacred. Like God is just something we get to freely do as it fits our life. And we put it right there with all the wooden blocks and the money and the created things that we've built with our own hands. It's not sacred. And see, there's another thing, like I said, that is sacred, like God, that's supposed to be like that, and that was your marriage. You had vows. If you had traditional vows, what did they say? What did the traditional vows say? Do you know them? Your marriage, your vows were supposed to be something greater than yourself that you give your life to. That's what makes it sacred. And so here's what they used to say. I take you, my spouse, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, for richer or poor, to love and to cherish, till death do us part, according to God's holy ordinance. According to God. Right? It was a commitment. They were sacred. You sat there and said, I am now stepping aside from being the only person that matters in my life, and now you matter. So whether I'm rich or poor, whether I have that good job or bad job, or making money or not making money, or whether I'm sick or I'm healthy, it doesn't matter. Like you come first. Sacredness. Today, our vows are kind of like, I love you as long as our truths align. As long as you make me happy. You know? See, they're not sacred anymore. We pledged our faithfulness to another. Something bigger than ourselves. We said, this is going to be bigger than my everyday, just general profane life. Right? And so what happens is, though, over time you begin to lose the sacred. You begin to look at your marriage and your family and as just the same as everything else. Like if I get to it, I get to it. If I have time for it, I have time for it. I look at God the same way. You know, you lose that value that this is bigger than me. And here's what happens when you lose the value that your marriage or your family or relationship that you're invested into is bigger than yourself, is more important than you. You know what happens? You know what becomes the most important to you? You. Your whole view. You now have nothing bigger than yourself that you give your life to. Now it's all about you. You become the most important thing in the world. When you lose the sacred, you move to the love of self. You slide to the love of self. When there is nothing bigger than me, I become the most important thing. It's about the love of self. How do I remain happy? How do I get what I need? Now you hear this in broken relationships. You're not giving me what I need. I'm no longer happy. You're not meeting me where I want to be met. See? My needs are not being fulfilled. It's pride. It's pride. Now it becomes all about your needs. Your love of God, your love of your significant other becomes about what are they doing for me now? And I can only sit around thinking about how dissatisfied I am. And if I won't ask you to admit that today, but how many times do we get to that place in your marriage and you're just like, man, the food's gotten worse since we got married. Mine's gotten better. I said it. Okay. But you know, like, I don't feel like they look up to me like they used to. They don't give me praise. My sex life is not like it used to be. Like, I'm not getting fed the way I desire. It's the love of self. And so the chief aim becomes all about meeting your own needs. And then when you hit that spot, you know that you're on the slippery slope of unfaithfulness, because now the whole game of life is trying to make you happy, and we are incessantly unhappy. If there's anything about being human, it's that we will never fill that big void of unhappiness. Like, it's a sucking vacuum, a black hole of need, And then it becomes that. So the love of self. So we move from the lack of knowledge to the loss of the sacred, to the love of the self. And as we continue to slide down that, now it's just all about me, and then it leads to the lusting for more. Now that it's all about me, it's just all I can do is lust for more and more to try to fill that vacuum. So here's what Hosea says. He comes and he says, man, I gave Gomer bread. I gave her wine. I gave her everything she needs. Like, everything she needed, I gave to her. But then it says this in verse 5, she was shameless, though, as a prostitute. And she became pregnant in a shameful way. She had children born into adultery. She said, I'll run after my other lovers and sell myself to them for more food and more water. I need more of what I already have. And so in 2:13 he says, she decked herself with rings and with jewelry, and she went after her lovers, but me she forgot. Like, she went for more. I want more affection. I want more rings. I want more jewelry. I want more food. And he says, I've already given you wine. I've already given you affection. I've already called you my own. But me she forgot because she wanted more. She wanted more, and she was so unsatisfied. What is God saying? It's that Gomer is like us. It's like God's people. They are given everything they have by God himself, and yet they will run after anything that promises them more. More worth, more well-being, more security, more. We will sell our freedoms and our lives to our mortgages. We will sell our souls to our workplaces. There was a quote that says, you will spend most of your life working for a job that will replace you in a week. And I sat there going, it is so true. It'd take you like 6 months, but still, you got to have a search committee and all that. But nonetheless, that's all right. But I'll be replaced. And you're like, oh my gosh, you're right. I will slave. I told you, I'm like Brittany. I'm a slave for you. Like, you will slave away for something that needs to be replaced. Like, it's not my family. It's not my God, right? We'll give ourselves even to other temptresses and lovers because they appear to offer us more to meet our lusts, right? It appears that I will get what I need, what I'm yearning for, but I won't. And so we all, like prostitutes, walk away from God to give our whole selves to that which promises us more. And this is how unfaithfulness and adultery and broken relationships come about. It's a slide. And we start with a lack of knowledge. I don't know you intimately. I don't spend time with you. I don't see you as who you are. It slides to a loss of the sacred. Like, I don't hold you as a bigger value of me, God. I don't see you as more important than my endeavors. And then it moves to the love of self and the lust of more. And eventually what we learn in Hosea is it ends in losing everything. And some of you have been there. Some of you can see it coming. You end up losing everything. God tells us through the book of Hosea, you got to read through it, there's tons of information in it, but he says you're going to have illegitimate children. You're going to have children who were born to calamity, poor children born to adultery. Like, they're going to have a broken family, and many people who have broken relationships know that. Like, children are torn apart. They're sharing Christmases like they're acting out because they're trying to find that stability that they lost. There is a brokenness. There is a loss to the most important things in your life. And it says she's going to run after her lovers, but soon even her lovers are going to abandon her. And all that grain and all that wine, all that moolah, all those parties she was enjoying, all that hobnobbing, all that money, he says it's all going to disappear. You're going to lose everything. You're going to be utterly desolated is what God is telling Israel. You keep running after these other things. Here's what Israel is doing so you have some backstory. They were doing really well financially and economically, but they saw the writing on the wall, so they started making agreements with Assyrians and Babylonians and saying, hey, if you protect us, we will serve you. And they began to get in bed with these pagan countries, selling themselves to them, saying, if you give me more security, more money and support, we'll praise your gods, we'll worship with you, whatever gods you want to worship. And what ended up happening is the Assyrians came in after making these agreements, and they first said, okay, you can have your own land and we'll support you. And then it's like, okay, we're going to place our own person in charge of your land. And then it was, you know what, we're just going to take you into slavery. They got in bed with somebody that promised them more than what God was already giving them, they thought. And they ended up taking them into slavery. It actually happened. Literally. And so here's what God says in chapter 2. He says, I'm going to take back my wool and my linen and the things I've given you that were intended to cover your nakedness, the things I wanted to help you feel secure and that you didn't have to be ashamed, but you're going to lose those, and now you're going to be exposed. Your lewdness is going to be exposed before the eyes of your lovers, and no one is going to take you out of my hands. You know what God is saying? He's like, you're going to be so wrecked, you're going to be so used and abused that by the time you stand there, you're going to be naked, and people are going to be looking at you going, I don't even want that. You're going to be so used that you're not going to even be desired anymore. You're going to be slaves until you can't work anymore. And that's the reality is I will work at my job until I can't do it very well anymore, and people go, okay, I'm done with you. I just heard a story from a friend. He's about 80 years old, and he was telling me he has a 58-year-old son. And he goes, my son is 58, he's been working at the company, but they owe him 3 times more than the young people they could hire, so they're trying to move him out before his retirement. Because they can hire somebody more on the cheap. As soon as you can't do your job, you're expendable, and that whole nest egg you thought you were going to get from this company is on the line. Right? He says they're not even going to want you by the time you get to that point. So he says, Gomer, Israel, she will follow her passions, and she's going to be pimped out so much she's going to be stripped bare. She's going to lose everything. So not only now is she separate from her husband, she's not only separated from God, but even those things and lovers she ran after will eventually not want her. Worse yet, though, the scene that is described here, it gets even darker. It gets much darker. Because what we learn is that after she's prostituted herself for these riches, she is now in slavery and being sold to the highest bidder. It's like human trafficking. It says this is literally what would have been happening. She would have been stripped bare and sold to the highest bidder. Here's how we know that. In chapter 3, verse 2, Hosea says that I bought her back for 15 pieces of silver and 5 bushels of barley and a measure of wine. When you add these things together, that comes out, what the cost of that is 30 shekels. 30 shekels is what it costs to buy a slave back. They have now gotten to this point where they are stripped bare to the highest bidder. You guys seen the movie Taken? Number 1? In the movie Taken, Liam Neeson has this daughter who is not by no fault of her own other than going to Europe. That's why I don't go. They would take me. I'm takeable. Jeez. Yeah. This is serious. No, but they take her, and he goes, if you know the story, he goes running after her, trying to figure out where she's at. He goes whooping these guys because, they're trying to hide her in this human trafficking ring. But at the end of the movie, she is his daughter. his daughter, who he loves like any of us would love our own children, is standing almost naked in front of this circular room. And behind windows around this whole circle lays rich men sitting there bidding on her, trying to up the price so they could buy her for their own desires and lusts. And Liam Neeson breaks into one of the rooms, and he holds a gun to a guy's head, and he's like, bid on her. And he makes him bid and win so that he can get her back. And Hosea is like, I am going to pay, even though I've already given my life to her, I'm her husband, I already am embedded with her. He's like, I'm going to pay 30 shekels more to buy her back. Even though she's left me and been an adulteress and a prostitute, I will spend more. I will pay whatever price to get her back. See, it's a dark, prophetic word. He says, church, you're standing there. You've loved so many things that keep taking from you, and you are being stripped naked, whether you see it or not, whether it be spiritually or emotionally or physically, or the separation of your family and your children, or the loss of your identity and work. Like you are being stripped bare from these things that you think will provide. But then God's love shines through in this dark story. God's love shines through because Hosea is like God. He says, I don't care how much you've hurt me, I'm buying you back. I'm buying you back. I will spend even more. Gomer has taken his money and abused it. He squandered it on other lovers that are other gods. But nonetheless, Hosea now steps in to pay the price. This is our story with God. This is not a story, this is your story. God is still saying to us today, I am the one who is faithful to you. I have given you everything you have. There's nothing you're working with, not your family, not your money that I didn't create. Everything has already been given to you. But you continue to pursue other things, other jobs, other people to give you your worth, and you give your whole self to them, and you won't give me barely any of you. And what is going to happen is if you keep going, you're going to be stripped bare. And your lusts are never going to be fulfilled the way you think they are. By the end, you're going to be stripped of your joy and be filled with anxiety. By the end, you're going to be stripped of your family, whether it be through literal separation or just the loss and distance that you experience with your family and your marriage. By the end, you're going to be stripped of the health that you hoped for when you made those vows in your marriage. By the end, those ramifications are going to flow down to your kids if you keep going. But here's what God says. He says, even though that is the case, even though you have been incredibly unfaithful, my people, I'm still willing to pay the price and beckon you to come home. God beckons you to come home. Just like Hosea to Gomer. Like, leave this stuff and come back. I will pay whatever is necessary. Hosea-To says this, she will chase after her lovers, but she will not catch them. She will look for them, but she's not going to find what she's looking for. And then she will say, I will go back to my husband as it was at first, when we first met, when we were first in love, when I knew that he was my provider and my everything. For then I was better off than now. For when I found God, I knew I was restored, and I walked away. For when I found the truth of his grace and the redeeming quality, when he found me when I was lost, and then I was found, and then I walked away from that. It was better off then than now. And God, later in the chapter, in multiple places, he says these things, like even though he's angry and he's upset, he says, my compassion for her is aroused. Like my heart is breaking for her, even though I'm angry that you've cheated and left me and neglected me and prostituted yourself. Like my compassion is aroused and I will welcome her back. He says, I will take her away from all this calamity and I will take her to the wilderness and I will speak tenderly to her. I will speak with tenderness and I will say, please come back home. And you know what happens is there are times in which the people, us, or people you love go, I don't want to. I'm going to continue in my ways. But then there's times when we go, God, I have gotten to the worst place possible. It has gotten so dark. I've been doing it my own way. I've been pimping myself out, and it has just been used and abused, and I've never felt worse in my life. And you come and you go, how can you take me back? I can't come back home. I cannot come back home. Because if I come home, you're going to see that I have been used. Like, how could you forgive me? Like, I am so gross. I have been so impure. I have been so unworthy. And God looks upon us, his promiscuous lover, and he still says, I know, come home. He says, come home. Flow back into me. You spend time. And here's what he says. Here's how it works. He says, reject your false loves. Like you've got to walk away and relearn one another. You've got to reject those things you thought were going to. You can't keep hanging out with these people who are pimping you and love God. Like you've got to reject it and learn and relearn the love of God. You know, and here's what I mean by relearn one another. It's like I said, if you're going to really love with knowledge somebody, you've got to look upon their person. You've got to gaze upon them. You've got to sit there and communicate with your eyes and your time, and you've got to learn their hopes and dreams again. Like it's got to be an intimate knowledge. He says, I want you to come home and re-engage with me that way. Like, be in my word. God has given us his word to say, here, know my character. Know how I operate in history. Remember how I've loved you. He says, come back home and learn me and learn how I love and learn how I have compassion on the hurting and remember my mission and the things we said we would do together. Like, let's get that knowledge, that intimacy back. Reject your false loves. Relearn one another. Right? And then it's recommit to a new covenant. Renew a new covenant. What does that mean? It means after you're learning, you're dating again, you're loving again, you're learning the intricacies and idiosyncrasies of the other. You know, I'll go, you know those vows we once held as sacred? Remember those things we said to each other when we first met, when we first got married, that we said this was going to be bigger than ourselves? Today, I'm telling you, God, I'm recommitting. I'm not going to chase after these things anymore. These are profane, and I'm going to hold you in the sacred. I'm going to recommit myself to this new covenant. I'm going to renew our vows. I'm going to say, God, it's for sicker or poor, in sickness or in health. Whether I'm making money or not making money, like you are priority. If I've got to put off some stuff to be with you in church, with people, with your word, then I'm going to be a little poor because you are bigger than me. This thing we've got going is bigger than all of that. Just like our marriage. This thing we said we committed to was supposed to be bigger than all of that. And so we renew that covenant. When we get back to that place, when that thing, those vows, our God is sacred, when we hold that as greater than all these other endeavors we have, then we get to rejoice in his love. Because you experience it, it's fulfilling, you finally get that thing you were searching for. You know, I was once promiscuous, I was once unfaithful, but you have not only welcomed me back, you have paid the price for my freedom. You get to rejoice in that. Like, how does God allow me to restore this marriage? He didn't just say, fine, I'll let you back. You can sleep on the couch. He says, no, come back home. Let's relearn each other. Let's recommit. I will wipe it away. I will pay the price, whatever it takes to get this back. And then you can rejoice in that type of love, that unconditional love. Here's what's crazy. Hosea paid this price for Gomer, which amounts to 30 pieces of silver, 30 shekels, so he could buy her back as a slave. And he says, you will no longer be a slave, you will be my love. So he buys back this wife that has cheated on him and prostituted herself. Just a little while later, a few hundreds of years later, Jesus would do one better. He would actually allow himself to be sold for 30 pieces of silver, a slave's wage, so that he could take your place as a slave so that you could be freed from your sin. Hosea paid 30 pieces of silver to free her. Jesus took your place for 30 pieces of silver, to be sold to his death, to his crucifixion, so that you could find freedom. And he did it even one better. He says, I'm giving my whole self. I'm giving my whole life. I'm not just giving some money. I'm giving my whole sacrificial life so that you can be restored to that relationship with God that you've walked away from. So that you can find restoration in your broken relationship. Even though we've been unfaithful, even though we've chosen sin and idols and the lust of more over God day in and day out, he still pays the price for our whole life so that we can come back into that union with God. See, though we've lived a promiscuous life, through Christ, we have been bought back at a price. And make no mistake, you and I have been promiscuous. This story is about us. It's about giving our whole selves to things that only use and abuse us because they offer us the idea, the theory of more, while rejecting the one who has died for us, who would give his whole self, his whole life, who would pay the price for us. We're going to do communion today. If my communion team will come up, please. He is still, I don't know where you've been. Some of you are probably here carrying that baggage of broken relationships, that baggage of knowing that you just haven't really known God like that anymore. Maybe it's that baggage of knowing you've been chasing and feeling that experience of being stripped bare. Maybe some of y'all feel fine. I don't know. But God is still today saying, come home. Will you come home? Will you reject false loves and come home? Some of you are facing that in your relationships. Some of you are facing that in your marriages. We talk about this slide. And maybe you're not at the end of it yet. Maybe you are. Maybe you're at the beginning. I don't even know who they are anymore. Maybe you're in the middle. They're not meeting my needs. Some of you are there. And here's what we learn from Hosea. The same reason we've been unfaithful and broken and distant in our relationships is because we have the same relationship to God. If your spouse, if your marriage, if your children are all about making your needs feel met, then that's probably how you treat God. God, you're not meeting my needs. If it's about getting more, if you're constantly dissatisfied in your relationships, perhaps that's probably how you are in your faith. That's what we learn from Hosea and Gomer, is that they're living an example of how their love for God really is. And that's where it starts. It starts with a lack of knowledge of intimately knowing God. And that they work together in tandem. The more broken I am from God, the more broken my relationship is. If you lack intimacy with God, it's very possible you're lacking intimacy in your personal relationships. And if you're going after a bunch of other things that promise you something better than what you're experiencing at home, you're probably doing the same than what you're experiencing at church or in community. I'm looking for something greater. God's not meeting me there. Our relationship to God is indicative of our relationship with others and vice versa. Our deepest relationships, not our shallow, fake ones. And if you're tired of moving further and further down that slide of unfaithfulness, of adultery, of prostitution, it is going to first start by running back to Christ and saying, God, I want to know you. Like, get that relationship right, and it will change the way you do relationships. Do you understand me? God, I want to know you. I have lost the knowledge, the understanding of who you are. Like, I don't sit with you. I don't see you. Like, I don't date you. I don't spend time with you. And as I do that, it's going to change the way I do that with my deepest relationships. God, I want to hold you as sacred. Like, I will not let other things be more important than you. And as I learn to do that with God, I'm going to learn to do that with my deepest relationships. God, this life is not about my needs. You are so much greater than them. It's so much bigger. I'm going to serve and give myself to something so much bigger than myself and not just love myself. And as I learn to do that, I'm going to do that in my relationships. The most serious ones, the deepest ones. Today we're going to take communion, but I do want to offer this opportunity on two accounts. Some of you are doing that with God. You're distant. You're finding your value, your worth, and all these other things that keep stripping you. And he is calling you now, right at this moment, come home. And I want to give you that opportunity. If you are in that place where you're like, I have run away from God in search of other things, he's saying, come home. And here's what we're going to do today. It's going to be weird. All right? Some of you are in that place in your marriage, and I know it because I keep getting emails and conversations about it. I'm going to ask you, I talked about you have to come back and renew those vows. I'm going to give you an opportunity today to come do that with your spouse if they're in this room right now. To say, I know we've grown distant. I know I have not known you intimately. And we're going to just sit here and renew our vow to God and to one another. If that is you, I encourage you to come up now and be bold about it. Is there anybody? It's just going to look each other in the eye and say, I am tired of running and splitting and sliding further and further away. We're going to have a recommitment ceremony right now. Pastor Nick. Come on up. The others, here's the other side of it. It doesn't have to be a marriage. If you know that your life with God has been reflective of your deepest relationships, that you have been divorced from God, that you have been searching for all other things but God, take communion today, because this is what it was about. Christ paid the price. When we take communion, if this is new or foreign to you, we are remembering the blood of Christ. We are remembering the body of Christ. And saying, God, I remember that you have poured out, like Hosea, you have paid 30 shekels for me. Like Christ, you have given your whole life and gone into slavery for me and been brought to death only to see resurrection. Like, I want to hold that as sacred, and this is a sacred opportunity to say, God, I want to recommit to you. And you don't have to come up, but if you want to, you can. But is there anybody who's like, I have been like Gomer to God? Just raise your hand for me, and we'll pray over that too. See you. Got you. As you take communion, thank you. As you take communion today, I want you to remember the price that was paid by your lover, Jesus Christ, who loves you that immensely. And he's saying, come home. So we're going to take communion real quick. You guys got yours? Okay. First, your marriages start like that. God, but it starts with God. The knowledge of God, the remembering, the intimacy of God. Lord, you have poured out your life for me. And so as we drink of this, we drink it as in we are remembering his blood spilt for us. That he has given his whole self, and that would be the cornerstone of our relationships going forward. and the cornerstone of our relationship to God, that we are freely welcomed back home by his blood. So as we take that, let's think about God and his sacrifice. And as we take the bread, it's his body broken for us. It is to help us remember that he has given his whole self. It takes his whole self for his Gomer, who has walked away from him, who has sold herself away from him, who said, everything else is more important than you. He says, I still will give you my whole self. So let's do this in remembrance of Christ, whose body was broken for us. Now, here's what we're going to do. I want to give one last chance. Even if your spouse isn't here, if you want to pray about that in your life. But if they are, I'm going to give you one last chance. We're going to renew our vows. And if this isn't you today, you can do it with your spouse right with you if you want. You don't need to be up here. Or if you don't have a spouse, this is your relationship to God, because that's first and foremost. That's first and foremost. God, first we start here. I'm going to love you in sickness and in health. I'm going to love you when things are working in my life and things are not. I'm going to love you when I'm sicker or poorer or richer or poorer. Till death do us get together all the time. For eternity. Like, that's our love of God. So for the rest of you, I encourage you to look at your notes and talk about that slide and have those discussions. Maybe you're doing great and that's awesome, but talk about it. Like, if Michelle and I were doing great, but if we sit down and go, hey, is that lack of knowledge? Are we teetering on the edge of that we aren't spending enough time together to remember who we are and what we believe in and feel with each other, like that's the first stage. Where are we at with God? Like, where are we at in that? I hope we renew our intimacies with God. That's my challenge to you. Don't just have another Sunday. Don't just have another communion. Renew your intimacy with God. Saying, I need to put you first above these things, and whatever it takes, richer or poor, sickness and health, I'm going to do that to put you first and learn who you are and what you're about, because everything, I believe, will flow out of that. You guys agree? All right, if you'll pray with me. God, thank you so much for these graphic descriptions in Hosea. Like, they just pierce our hearts. For those, God, I pray for those who maybe they can be neglected in this sermon, Lord, because there are those who have been betrayed and cheated on and left, and they didn't have a chance to reconcile. But God, I pray right now for them that you would just have this peace on their hearts, that you are the first bridegroom, that you are the first person that gets all of our attention, all of our emotion, all of our passion. Lord God, I pray that you fulfill them, that you restore them, that if it's not in the cards to restore the marriage, we pray for that. But if it's not there, Lord, that it's the restoration of your relationship, that is where we would learn to dwell in you, to find peace in you, to find our comfort, our identity, our hope in you. I pray for all of us, it doesn't matter, in a marriage, single, that we would find our hope and our passion and our sustenance in you, that we can stop lusting for more and more, because once we can rely in that relationship, we don't need to put the pressure of being God on anybody else. And we can find peace in those relationships. So God, I just pray for restoration in all of these places, whether single, whether together, whether divorced, whether doing well, God. God, I just pray that you would restore our relationship to you first and foremost, God, that we would find intimacy with you, that it wouldn't just be a list and set of knowledge, that we would come to understand and love your word and know your intricacies. God, I pray that right now, Lord, just a spirit. Hosea says there was a spirit of prostitution in his people. Lord, we pray for a spirit of deep, abiding marriage. In Jesus' mighty name. And all the people said, may your week be blessed. I will see you next week.